Yeah, probably. It's probably a good idea. Do you use the CNN app? I know you don't use a Fire Stick,
No,
but
I don't use
I use
CNN
the
yet.
CNN app on the Fire Stick. I know you probably judge me harshly for having a Fire Stick,
A little bit, but
but
beggars can't be
it's
choosers.
so like clumsy, the app. It never goes, even if you select live view, you have to like tinker with it and like trick the system
It's pretty
into like
terrible.
signing you in.
Yeah, it's pretty
It
terrible on iPhone. I mean, like the app is it's like four apps built on top of one. It's weird.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not a good experience. They should check that out.
Yeah, it's only if CNN had enough money to for QA testing and to garner feedback from the people who listen to it. But they don't have to give a crap because they're the only moderate cable news network, according
According
based
to
on their own, yeah, according to them, right?
to James Earl Jones.
They don't even use that anymore.
Yeah, the most
I
trusted name in news or the
that's
most
still
watched.
James Earl Jones says that.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I
his
didn't realize
voice is
that.
all over that. Yeah,
I didn't realize they still. Oh, okay. Wow, that's impressive. That's
I
like
think.
what?
So. I
That's like
mean, I
20
don't know if.
years.
Yeah,
20
I don't know
years
if
of
it's the
using the
same recording.
same record. Yeah. Well, maybe they got him to come back into the booth and do a little bit more work. Get that
A
smooth
little
Darth Vader,
voiceover. Yeah.
smooth deep Darth Vader sexiness onto the CNN promo.
Um, so I had a question. I know that we wanted to dive into something,
Well, yeah. Well, go on.
but I did have a question. There's all of this talk, or I don't know if you've seen this, but on Twitter, a lot of people are like tongue in cheek joking about this, um, around like what's the Trump library going to be? Where is it going to be? What's it all going to be about? And I've made my like silly
Yeah,
comments about it and stuff,
you're
but
taking pot shots.
I have to be honest. What I'm most curious about is how Disney is going to treat Trump in its Hall of Presidents attraction. I want, I kind of want to see where they go with this.
It's gonna be like there's whenever they do the Olympics and the guys like usually they're doing the torch and they'll do it through like the various years that the Olympics were happen to run, and then the guy like falls down and does something dramatic whenever like they pass through the year of I think the one Olympics was like it was like a year, and the I guess the World War II years I believe is when the Olympics were not run. I don't know, don't quote me on that, but I'm just saying it's gonna be something dramatic like that. It's gonna have like some sort of it's gonna have a backdrop of the Capitol, and then you're gonna see like the shadow of flames and like people yelling, like just indiscriminate yelling, um, and
Just like mob
yeah,
noises.
yeah, exactly. It's gonna be like Disney-fied mob noises. That sounds more like a dying Tyrannosaurus, but you get the gist. So it's gonna be like that, and then they're gonna do some sort of like special dispensation about, especially if he gets impeached, about during the darkest points of our time, and they're probably going to have George Washington come in and read some nonsense, or Abraham Lincoln come in and start reading something about nation building and the unity of the war, and
Are they going to have his animatronic thing like pick up a glass of water with two hands?
that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I don't even think they won't
Walk
even.
down a ramp and
I
go
don't
off
think.
stage.
Yeah, I don't think they'll waste the time in building animatronics for him. I think he will literally be like some sort of back wall animation, where it's just sort of like
He'll
his.
greet you at the door. That's where you turn in your 3D glasses. Just, he's
He's
like
the
the bin.
he's the bin. It's a dump bin. You
Well,
dump
I
your
mean,
glasses. Yeah,
I want to say I've been to the Hall of Presidents twice, but I was young, and I wish I was old enough to pay attention to how they treated Nixon, because I'm pretty sure every president has
is
some
there. Nixon's there.
role, right?
Yeah, Nixon's
And
there.
for all of his shadiness, I'm sure he had something eloquent to say at one point, and they probably leaned on that snippet hard.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, probably.
what would they what snippet, what soundbite would they take from Trump that's like not offensive? What would they do that's applicable to Disney, to the audience at Disney World?
I don't know, something about like good steaks and golf courses. Something like that. It's gonna be weird. You're gonna scratch your head whenever they do delve into that, and you hear that soundbite. You're gonna scratch your head and say, "Did he say that?" You're gonna walk. You're just gonna sit back in your seat and be like, "Did he say that?" And everyone's gonna be on their phones looking it up every time they go through the Hall of Presidents to be like, "Did he actually say that? Was there a place where he said that?"
I almost want to look up like Google like Trump non-offensive quotes and like just see what comes
You
up,
know
if
what?
anything.
That's a cool Twitter account. I mean, this isn't the time for that kind of Twitter, but that would be a pretty fun Twitter account had we not have were we not living in the middle of a coup and impeachment. But Trump inoffensive tweets. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I'm just very curious to like what would they do? Yeah, I don't want to keep harping on it. It was just a curiosity of mine. I just don't know what I'm even as you were talking, I'm trying to just like pull out, even if it's out of context, not really out of context, but something normal that he's done. And it's so hard because every speech he's ever given, he's turned into a rally
Yeah.
to rail against opponents or whatever it was. It's always bizarre and
Something. Yeah.
yeah, and so it's nothing is nothing's pure in that way where you can just say like, oh yeah, I remember when he said that and it wasn't confrontational, it wasn't offensive, it wasn't contradictory, it was a totally normal thing for him to say coming from a sincere place. I cannot think of one thing, which is why uh, I think Disney has their work cut out for him on this one. How do you Disneyfy? What would that
Disney.
be?
Yeah.
How do you do that to Trump?
I could see. I mean, I'm sure there's fan art right now that has art that has Trump basically somewhere between Ursula and Jafar. Like it's just like they're just doing a pan of all the Disney of all the Disney villains, and Trump is just sitting there somewhere in between because he would fit in perfectly. He's got the orange skin, he's got the overly yellow blonde hair.
Well, I've been very curious to see how authors and directors and stuff, writers, how they use Trump as inspiration without being on the nose, like you said, with the hair and the orange skin. How do you?
Wonder Woman '84, perfect.
But that was hair, and I mean, I don't know. His
It's a joke. It's facetious.
no. But I want to take that because I think you have something there. But I don't even want to credit that character with Trump being the inspiration. Although maybe it was, and maybe I liked I thought the character was done well, so I don't want to give Trump that credit. So maybe this is my own sensitivity dripping in.
Didn't you listen to the Honest Reviews trailer?
No, I did not actually. No.
You should have. I mean, they had a really good point. They say a character loosely based on Trump, except he loves his son. It's pretty good.
That's sad.
It's
Yeah.
pretty decent. It's not so bad.
God, it's so hard for me to like feel bad for them.
For the Trump family.
The Trump family. Like normally I can like relate on some level.
I'm not gonna go after a little kid.
Oh well, not him, no. But no, he. I mean, I have nothing against that kid. I don't know anything about him, and he's too young to be responsible for himself in that way. But
I hope it's not that like episode 2 where Boba Fett's dad gets his head cut off by a Jedi, and it's like you're like, this is a noble point, and then he's looking up, and you're like, well, one day that this kid becomes a horrible mercenary. But
no, you hope it isn't that cliche thing of
really wreck some stuff up. So.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we're not looking at something like that. Hopefully, Barron will fully understand the weight with which maybe he'll be a voice of good. Maybe this will turn him to be like, I'm not going to be my father's son.
Be Luke.
Right. Exactly. Perfect. Wow. That's good. Barron.
Luke.
Yeah. He could be Luke. I mean, part of what makes Luke is that he's taken away from his biological family and he's raised on a rural farm,
a moisture farm, right?
A moisture farm, far from, the influences of society, so that way he can be good. It's a little late for Barron at this point, but that would have been a nice idea. Take Barron away to a little farm somewhere.
Well, I mean, we don't know where Trump's going to end up after all this. He may be disconnected from his father. His father might not be around much longer.
Well, at least he's got a trust fund. I'm sure people will come to that. So.
I'm sure he'll be fine.
At least the boy will have means.
So,
yeah, where do we go from there?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about this Renegade Cut video, so I'll let you do the intro. It's your thing. You take it away.
Well, I mean, look, Renegade Cut is a really cool YouTuber. He does movies. He does like cinema theory. What's the word for that? Where you do like you talk about movies, but in a theoretical way. It's like literary criticism, except it's for movies. That's basically.
Is it like the guy that Will Ferrell used to play on SNL, the Actors Studio?
Except good. Yeah. Sure.
What's his name?
Inside the actor studio.
It's like an L, something with an L.
I'm forgetting his name. But anyway, and then what he does is he from every now and then, instead of doing film, he does like commentary, like social commentary based on. It's always based around politics, and he basically does he does a deep dive into a particular like political theory or just something that we take for granted, and he kind of just discusses it by starting with the history of it and then how it worked, how it morphed into what it is today in terms of the modern age. He's really good. I mean, people should check it out. It's called Renegade Cut. I'm a big fan, and then he did one episode where he was basically, it was like a question. It's like, no more presidents. Do we need presidents? And then he does a deep dive on the creation of the office, how it's morphed through history, and how it's how it currently influences our lives today. And the president is, the argument he makes is that the president is more powerful than any previous king in all of history. So, he's sort of saying if this democracy is all about having overthrown a king, we currently have like an office that substitutes as a monarch, and the only thing that limits that this all-encompassing power is the fact that this person has to leave every 8 years. So
the guy brings up some good points. It's super interesting. First, though, I don't know if you know the answer to this. Who is this person? Because whenever someone starts lecturing, or I want to know who I'm listening to. I want to know what the trust factor is. Like, who is this person?
I mean, I think he's just a fan. I mean, he's a self-avowed film lover. I think.
What does he do for a living? How does he make his money? Who is this person?
This is what he does for a living. I mean, I don't think this is what he always did for a living, but right now, I think that he's able to make his monies.
He's an actor. Come on.
He is not an actor. He is not an academic. He doesn't teach anywhere.
A journalist?
He's not a journalist. But I think
Leon Thomas, is that his name?
That's his real name, yes, that's correct. I mean, anyone could look up the bio. I mean, I just don't think there's a lot to his bio.
Well, that's the thing. I think I had trouble finding a bio on him.
Well, I said look at his Patreon because I
don't know what that is. I've never heard that before.
Patreon is like it's like a tip service for where you could sponsor creators. It's basically it takes its name from like the 18th century, 17th century usage of to patronize like.
Okay, here we go. I don't know what this is. Everybodywiki.com. At least I got something on them. Renegade Cut is an analytical series about film techniques and philosophies espoused by individual films. Common topics include political, philosophical, and social issues. Lee Thomas was a former literature teacher before working for Channel Awesome, which he left in 2016. I don't know what that is. So there you go. He was a literature teacher. So he's a teacher. So that's something. Now at least I have an anchor point. I have like some idea of who this person was.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessary. I think if someone comes up with good ideas.
Yeah, but how are you supposed to know? No, I don't think that, because you need to know what's fact and opinion, and that needs to be discerned.
Everyone has an opinion. Any journalist can have an opinion.
Yeah.
You have to look at the body of the work. That's how you learn.
No. You need to know if it's true what they're saying. Someone could just talk about space. Yes. I don't know. Just like I go to the mechanic and I have no idea what they're talking about with my car. I need to know that it's true. You could tell me some made-up part needs to be fixed and it's $1,000. You need to know fact.
A mechanic can do that because you don't know. So they can take advantage of your.
And they can talk. This guy's over here quoting dates and the ways things were between periods of time. Like, you need to be able to trust that. No, you need to know that it's true. We can't just make it up.
He didn't live during those times, so he read about it. Just like people, that's what people do who are interested in a particular field, and then they become more knowledgeable about that field by continuing to read and educate themselves.
I think you need to vet the people that you're absorbing.
I'm just saying you could.
I don't know. That's my thing. So anyway, the video starts out with an interesting premise, or at least giving context to the office of our presidency, which I liked. And the president, I guess, in the U.S. is the head of government and the head of state. And he defined it quickly as the head of government is the chief officer of the executive branch. The head of state is a public representative. Yes. I didn't really go into the definitions of those two jobs, and to be honest with you, I don't really know. the differences between them, you might. But
he changes depending on the government. So if you were to say the head of state for, like, if we were to use the British system, the head of state is the Queen. She is the representative of the United Kingdom. And then the what's the secondary job? I always forget. It's head of state, and then what's the other one?
The head of government.
Right. The head of government would be the prime minister. So in the UK, those two roles are divided. And
yeah, and that's how it is in the UK. Denmark, same things, and then in Austria was the other example they gave, where the head of government in Austria is the chancellor,
right.
and the head of state in Austria is the president. Mm-hmm. So he made a comment here, and I'm not going to be ultra sensitive to it, but I do want to. It did it stand out to me, I guess, maybe because of political correctness and stuff, or the implication that it could have. But he was like, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's not so far off, that other countries can combine head of state and governor, and the countries that do that are located in Africa and South America. But among the global north, which is the term he used, and he defines that as a term that's normally described as rich nations. Yes. None of them do that. We're the only ones. It's not even rare, it's unique to us. Right. Out of all the rich nations, we're the only ones that combine head of state, head of governor. The only other countries that do that are in Africa and South America, which I don't want to disparage those countries. I know that there are some shady players and everything, but there are also some not shady players. So I don't know, I guess just unwealthy countries happen to consolidate power in that way.
Well, I mean, that's why you use these terms, because it makes it easier to talk about. That's why you say the northern nations versus the southern.
Sure, if we want to pretend like it doesn't mean something, but
well, it just helps quantify what you're discussing without getting into that sort of nitty-gritty that could just be more disparaging, where you're just simply saying that.
Well, I want to know why. I mean, I guess that would have made me feel better, and maybe then the episode, as it was only 30 minutes, would have been longer, but a quick sentence or two on maybe why that's the case. Because he said, the inference is that rich countries know how to govern and poor don't.
No, I would say that, yeah, see that, and again, right, this is one of those things where you come in to a person's sort of lexicon, their archive of their theory, essentially, because I mean, he basically builds a case, just like anyone who creates content. If you go back to his earlier videos, he discusses various aspects, and and he has a video, I believe, that discusses the ideology between northern nations and southern nations.
Well, that's a fair point. So if you covered this already, I wish you would have referenced the video for more information on why the global north and right. the other countries govern differently. Because I thought, as someone who came into it without any context, that sentence, probably more than any other one, he made some other claims that I was, again, just is that fact or is that your opinion? And which is why I want to know, who he is and where he's getting his information from. But that particular sentence stuck out to me, not because it went against his thesis here, but I felt like it was kind of a loaded statement to say, to make that comparison. The U.S. is the only ones of the global north that don't govern this way, just because it goes into, our view on individual citizens. Does your quality as a citizen equate to your wealth? Well, does your effectiveness of governing equate to your wealth as a nation? I don't know. A lot of it has to do with natural resources and everything else. So
right. I mean, and again, these are things that he does discuss in other videos. I mean, look, when you're making a video on a very complicated a topic, you have to take it. There's actual word for it. There's a term where you just have to have you just have to throw out some universally used terms for people in the know in order to get on with what you're trying to discuss.
Fair point. I'm probably very ignorant to this. No, I'm personally not familiar with that term global north, which probably says a lot about me. No, and that I don't know. It's not part of my lexicon.
Right. Yeah, because you don't use it, and you're not talking in these particular types of debates or
but I felt like he used it as a pot shot at the US to say, out of the global north, we don't do this when other countries do.
I think that you're misinterpreting the usage of global north. That's the thing. It's not a pot shot at the US in particular amongst the the other nations. It's more of like it's a weighted term that encompasses the history of colonialism and in the way in which the global north takes advantage of the southern countries' resources. So I mean that's part of where these terms come from. So I mean, it's not disparate. It's not a if yeah. I guess if anything, it's more of a condescending term towards the what you would previously call the first world nations. So maybe people don't use those terms anymore. These are the new terms that are sort of coming
Well,
up behind them.
well, I think, and again, maybe I don't know, I don't know how if I'm looking at this wrong, but looking at it from a sense of, are the best governed countries also the wealthiest countries? Because that's what he's saying, is that out of the wealthiest countries, we're the only ones that don't do this. And in what he's implying in the context there is that they do it best in a way. And I'm saying that I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that you could govern well, and there could be things that we could learn from you. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't just because you're not rich. And it goes back to this book I've read several years ago that was like Forgotten Founders or Forgotten Fathers. I apologize that I'm getting it wrong. But it was all about what the founding fathers learned from the Native Americans, specifically the Iroquois Indians and the nation. And I just, they obviously weren't wealthy by our standards, but we learned a lot from them. So I guess it was just that phrasing, and I know he probably didn't mean anything by it. I'm not saying he did, but it was just, I guess, the way that we're looking at it. I felt like it was a gap,
Right.
in the way that we're analyzing the U.S.'s ability to govern, because we didn't consider maybe some of the successes of people that are not in the global north.
And again, the only thing I reiterate is that the terminology is more in the vein of those who take advantage and those who are taking advantage of. So I mean, that's the thing. It's not that the southern countries cannot have good governments. It's that the global north constantly manipulates and interferes with the governments of the south, and basically in order to attain resources at an advantageous
And if that had an
advantageous scenario,
and if that has an impact why they have consolidated power, that would make sense.
Yes,
and I think
that's
the link there is what I'm missing. Why is it then that countries outside the global north have consolidated power?
Because they're the former colonial powers. That's why. That's why they have.
Well, then that's a really good point to make. Yeah, I wish.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a 30-minute video on presidents. You're not going to go into a history on colonialism, because I mean that's universal.
For whatever reason, it stuck out to me. For whatever reason, it stuck out to me. It's like, wow, that's a shot at Africa and South America. Like, geez. Yeah. So imagine being a citizen there and listening to the video, and you're like, damn.
Context is king, right? So. But I understand. I mean, that's. I think it's an important point, because if it stuck out to you, that's something that I would gloss over, because I follow him. I'm a little bit more inundated with these terms based on the videos that I watched. I mean, that's everyone's into different interests. So, yeah, that's important to hash that out to make sure.
No, I'm glad that you were able to counter the point, because I wasn't overly offended by it. I just thought it stuck out as odd. It was an odd point to make. Or using that, because it's, again, well, out of the rich nations, and somehow that equates to out of the nations that know how to govern, we're the only ones that have consolidated power, and I just found that
right.
weird.
But I think, right, and I think that the point is, let's get away from global north, global south. I think the point is that amongst our partner nations, who are not constantly being manipulated by external forces, who just simply govern sort of out of the purity of defining their own road, they're defining their own will, we have this unique sort of hindrance about our government that they do not have. And I think that's the point. That's what he's making, is that out of all these other nations that can do whatever they want, we choose through our own volition, through our own free will, we choose to have a government where we are giving increasing power to a single individual, although we claim to be, we're a republic, but yes, although we claim to be about the will of the people. So I think that's the point that's really being made there when he talks about global north versus the southern countries.
Fair enough. think we spent some time on that. So, no, it's fair enough. You've
It's a
changed
cool
my
look. It's a
mind.
cool concept, actually. I mean, I think it's fun to talk about things like this. I mean, we should do it. We should do it. I mean, I think it's interesting to break these things down. But yeah, well, what was the next point as you moved on through the video?
Uh, I mean, I didn't document every point throughout the video that I would want to talk about because I, to be honest, wanted to watch the video and enjoy it and absorb it. But I thought it was interesting. Um, I thought it was interesting in that him pointing out why the presidency. We always say the U.S. president is the most powerful person in the world, and I think a lot of this stuff really came together for me in this video. You kind of knew he was powerful because we're wealthy. We're the wealthiest country, and we have, arguably the largest global presence, the global influence. But it's paired with the fact that the president is head of state and head of government, and those two factors, him having consolidated power and the sheer scope of our country, is what makes him powerful. And that never really dawned on me, that second part, the consolidation of power, because to be honest with you, when I thought about queens and presidents in other countries when they were prime ministers, I honestly thought, they didn't have that much power. And so that's where I guess this whole public representative definition would have been helpful for me, because I'm still not sure why that's so important. Why is a prime minister and a federal chancellor, who's the head of government in these other countries, in what way are they not as powerful as the US president? What does that public representative head of state give the president that the other ones are lacking that make him so much more powerful?
It's the power over the party, especially when the party is in power. I mean, I think that's like the cleanest way to say it. It's it's in part, and I think this is what he does a really good job of in the video, is that when the reason that they enact the president is because they want to give the people something to align with. They want the president to be the embodiment of what the country is, because they basically say it was a show of strength. That's why the founding fathers created the presidency, and in that respect, that is not true of other nations where you have that separation. The Queen of England is the embodiment of strength of England. She exists. She's alive. She's alive. Yeah, she is alive. It's been a long time. But what is it in the God Save the Queen, right? The nation's song, the anthem is the strength of the nation is about their monarch.
I don't know what that means though. Like, I know that she's a wealthy landowner. I think that she's in charge. She's in charge of something.
Yeah,
is it the military? What is she in charge of?
She's not in charge of the military. No.
What is she in charge of? She's in charge of something. I just recently heard it.
That's my point. She's a symbol.
No, she's actually in charge of something.
Okay. Look up. While you look up, I'm going to continue to make my inroads about how the idea of a symbol is one thing, and then the idea of a legislator or an executive is another. And the fact that the president is both, that's what this video is claiming makes it problematic, because you don't want someone to be who is a symbol be also fallible, if that makes sense. Because, and the thing is, everyone is fallible, but the president in particular, when he makes bad decisions, is fallible and should be held accountable for those bad decisions. But you are constantly being railroaded of criticizing the president, because in some respects he is also the symbol of the nation, and in that strength, it makes him almost above reproach. And that's the point of the video, is that the more power the president consolidates, the more above reproach he will become, and the more likely he is to sort of cow his detractors into going along with him, which is very much what Trump did to the Republican Party for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I can't easily find. Yeah, I can't easily find, because it's bringing up history. I can't easily. Yeah, I need more than that.
Because she doesn't interfere with the government, with the day-to-day of the government. That's the whole thing. She's just the prime minister.
I don't know what that means, though. What does that mean?
Well, I'm just going to tell you. Look, when the prime minister wins the election, the prime minister has to go to Buckingham Palace, and then when they go to Buckingham Palace, they have an audience with the Queen, and the Queen allows them to form a government in her name. So that's what she is. She's a
So
symbol.
then tell me again why the prime minister isn't as powerful as the US president?
Because the symbol of the because the queen technically, I mean, the queen would never do this, but technically is the queen could kind of come in and oust the prime minister if she really wanted to do so. So she's technically the most powerful person in the country, but she holds no day-to-day managerial powers over the government. So that's why you have that symbol. That symbol is your check.
Yeah, she's the owner, not the acting CEO, but she's the majority stakeholder.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Right. That's perfect. If you want to talk about in capitalistic terms, she is the majority stakeholder who never votes
Who
on
doesn't
anything.
manage, who doesn't
That's
show up
right.
to any
Who
meetings.
doesn't? Who, yes, who doesn't? Who just? Well, she's like a board member. She sits by, listens to what the CEO has to say. Oh, like
He's the chairman
maybe
of the board.
yeah, babe. Maybe she gives a little advice here and there, but that's between her and the CEO. And then the CEO goes back to the people, the plebs that run that basically work in the country. I mean, in the company, and relays the orders and does what they want to do. So
So a little tidbit that I didn't God, it's like one of those things where I probably read it, but it never really sunk in. And then years later, when you see it in a video like this, you're like, oh wow, God, was it that long? And that was a tidbit about between when the country was founded and Washington was elected, 13 years had passed. And in between that 13 years, the states ruled equally.
yes, that's correct. Horizontal power.
Yeah, and the and I'm again, I didn't watch the video a ton, so forgive me if I'm not gleaning the right information here. But he claims the economy was actually really good at that time, and that the presidency was created. And this is where I don't know if he's getting cynical or if he can back this up, but the presidency was created to control the people. I mean, that's basically the claim he makes. And the controlling the people, that aspect, what he's referring to is in his eyes, or the eyes of the people he's reiterating, is that people were actually super engaged through various groups and organizations. And that was unsettling the government, the state leaders and the founders. And so they wanted to put a check in place to mitigate, I guess, this impulsive, uneducated population that was coalescing around things that they wanted locally, but didn't really understand how it impacted the country as a whole. It's kind of what I got from that. And so this was like for their own good, in a sense, to create this presidency. At least that's what they had claimed and what he was kind of getting at. But really, the country was operating fine without a president.
Yeah, I mean that's there's new interpretations to the history of the founding. You got Howard Zinn's A People's History. You have various detractors who are newer historians that are sort of taking the facts of the time, contextualizing them based on external factors and internal factors, and then coming to different conclusions. At the end of the day, this is interpretation. And that's the thing. I can't sit here and say, oh yeah, this is 100% factually what they were thinking. This is why they did it, because it's not necessarily what they were documenting per se at the time, at least as far as I know. And again, right, if you want to, he's a former teacher in this field. So if you want to, lay credence over to him or give leeway over to his interpretation of things, that's something we can do based on his credentials. I'm just sort of using your philosophy in terms of how you would how you select experts over amateurist. And yeah, I mean, I think that's where I happen to agree with it. But again, it's because I'm there with him in this journey. I'm one of the, based on what I've read and the way that I interpret the founding fathers, to me they seem very much about their own personal interests, starting from the Revolutionary War straight through in terms of the way that they set up the government. The government they set up definitely benefited anyone who was already making money at the time. The only person above them that was taxing them, the only person that could control the way in which they wanted to make money, was the King of England. And so to sever those ties definitely enriched them. And factually, they became a crapload richer after the Revolutionary War than they were before it. So you could take these facts and you can make inferences as to why they were doing what they decided to do. this is another one of those inferences. So
No, I mean, it's a fair point. It really is. There, the video.
well, I do want to say one more thing
Go
though.
ahead. Go ahead.
The thing that I actually did think that the economy that was set up in those 13 years, I was taught was not doing very well, and that's what he kind of addressed that in the video. He was sort of saying that what most people think is that the economy was quite weak. It's two different things. Is it because of Hamilton and the Federal Reserve? Because I mean, here's the thing: when the country first was started, the 13 colonies, every state was creating their own currency, and so they had to back up that currency within each state. And so I learned that became incredibly confusing, and it made it very tough to kind of have a cohesive economic system when everyone had their own inflation and their own, like, was balancing their own particular dollars. Like New York had their own coin, Pennsylvania had their own coin. So that's what I've learned. He's basically saying that what I learned was incorrect, and I'll take that, because I mean, the last time I read about this, I was probably 16 years old. So we could have learned more things at that time and contextualize it in terms of how the economy was doing. But yeah, to his credit, he's basically upending it and saying that the economies would have been fine, and they didn't necessarily need to all come together in the way in which they did, as a show, as like sort of like strengthening the fledgling American system. And, I mean, look, it's sort of what we wrestle with today, right? We have different regions with competing interests. You know, if they all had their own equal say, that would create coalition governments as opposed to the two-party system that we suffer through. So I mean, I'm saying again, there is something to what he's trying to say. So I can see where he's going, but I can't back it up and say that I know he's right from a fact, just an inference.
I think that's fair. I wish, and he may be on his site that I didn't see, or maybe it was in the end of the video and I didn't wait for it. I wish he would have given citations. Sometimes he does when he does quotes, but I wish maybe the citations are easier to find. So when he talks about that economy doing well, there's a book or books where it talks about that, and it would be easier to find. So maybe something to check out. There was something that he talked about. There's a few things, and that was about, and you touched on it earlier, about the expansion of the executive branch. And I thought that was really interesting because it kind of brought together a few different aspects of it. And I'm not sure I'm going to cover them all. So, anyone listening, go check out the video for yourself, and forgive me if I am not touching on all the points. I don't want to just rip off the video, but it's, one of them was the people vote for the House of Representatives. So you get that, right? But then the president is elected by electors that are chosen by state legislators. And he goes to the effort of saying, not the people. So I'll do that as well. The Supreme Court is appointed by the president, not the people, and senators are chosen by state legislators, not the people. So that was an interesting way of just like laying out how much you actually don't directly have control over when it comes to the people in our government, this representative democracy. Also, the people, and this is where it's an interesting thought experiment where people think that they have the power over the president. And he makes the argument that the president is elected, and the day that president is elected, the power dynamic shifts. We exercise our power once every 4 years, but then we kind of coast by on relying on our elected officials, which is arguably just the president because he's the only one nationally elected. Everyone else is elected in the ways that I just kind of talked about. We rely on those people that are representing us to have our best interests at heart. And so he makes the statement, and I'm not sure how much I'm paraphrasing, but the election isn't an exercise in power as much as it is an exercise in surrendering power. And the first time I read that, I almost took offense to it, right? I took offense to it. I'm like, how dare you say that about our free society? And then, I mulled it over for a couple seconds, rewatched the video a few times, especially that part. And I was like, yeah, damn it. So I was like, damn it. I think you might be right there. I think you might have something. So it was an interesting part that he brought up, and that he brings up the right to choose a president is better than not having that right. And I think we can all agree with that. But I think the getting back to the title of this video is, is there a better way? Okay, so yeah, if we're going to have a president, it's better to have a say in that than not, even if we're surrendering our voice for 4 years until we get a couple days to voice it again. But is there a better way of going about it? Do we have a better mechanism that we can look to from the global north or south as to how to represent the people? So I thought that was an interesting point. The other way that he has, the other point that he makes of the president expanding power specifically, which I never thought about until this video, and then it terrified me, was the way that the president expands power, not overtly through laws, but through creating agencies and departments, and through them expanding their remits. So I took a quick glance at this government site that kind of just lists, you can find it in a quick Google search, we'll post it for promotion of this episode, but all of the departments and agencies under the executive branch, I don't know how many there were. It honestly looked like there was 100. I probably counted at least 40 and then continued to scroll. And I was like, yeah, this is probably like 100 agencies. And it's everything from the FBI to the Department of Justice. And that one in particular is interesting. So that was created in 1870, according to the video. And we all know from Bill Barr and Donald Trump and the interactions they've had recently, I think a lot of people have paid attention to politics more than in previous years, is that Bill Barr was in charge of whether or not the president could be prosecuted for what he did. And that wasn't based on any law, but it was based on a policy. And the video goes into stating this. And it's a policy that the department themselves came up with, and the department head is appointed by the president. So you can see that out of just that 1 out of 100, let's say, agencies and departments that fall within there, how they can enable the president to be, above the law. So I thought that was a really interesting point. It's such a savvy thing to do politically. You know, you're not passing laws to say the president is immune. No, you're just creating agencies and departments that are responsible for those laws, for enacting those laws, for what's the word I'm looking for, enforcing those laws, and then circumventing them in very clever ways. So that was kind of eye-opening for me. I did not know there were that many agencies and departments under the executive branch.
That's cool. I mean, it was a really clever thing to bring up, because I mean, I'm not even going to say that I thought about the creation of agencies in that way. So that was definitely an eye opener to me as well. I mean, I can't even comment on it, because it's one of those, as Oprah would say, an aha moment, because you're like, wow, yeah, that's a lot of people who report directly to you. But it sort of harkens back to what we were talking about when we were saying that if you gave each department more autonomy, right, and then they were able to select their own heads as opposed to being selected by the executive branch, you would create an independence that might better hold the executive accountable. So that could be one of those savvy, like, clever things that could actually turn against the president. If a president were if the idea of anyone who takes office, they come into power thinking, I'm going to keep creating these various agencies in order to give me more and more leeway in terms of doing what I want to do. If the Republic, if the Congress were to turn that on their head and say, yeah, actually, we're going to create a bill that gives all these people the ability to name their own heads, then that would essentially just take a massive chunk out of the president's power without overtly attacking the president and saying, you have too much power, you need to cede power. It would just take it out of their hands. So I mean, that would be an interesting sort of a way to play a little political kung fu, as it were.
Wouldn't it be a cool, and I know this is a total pipe dream, but wouldn't it be a cool trend? You know, Biden's known for his most diverse cabinet ever. And what if each president, for at least a few administrations, tries to one up the last? Well, geez, I want to stand out for something noble and thought-provoking in a positive way, and all that. And, you know, where do you go? All right, what am I going to do? Make it more diverse? No, I want to do something different. What if they start relinquishing executive power in the way that you just said, where they're making these agencies and departments more autonomous, allowing the talent to bubble up rather than be appointed, so that not only does it keep the other branches of government in check, but the recommendations have the people's best interests at heart. It's led by the data and the science and the math and all of that stuff. So I don't know. I thought that was I thought that when you were talking, that's kind of what popped in my mind. I know that it'll probably never happen, but wouldn't that be cool?
It's just against human nature. I mean, I think the um, even the most benevolent of souls would have a hard time ceding that kind of power, because the thing is, when you get into office, you know, it's like a little taste. It's like a drug. You start off small. You start making a few executive appointments, and then you realize that you've got a lot more to do, and
It
then
just
you
takes
start.
one guy, right? I mean, is it? You tell me.
That's what I'm saying.
Dispel the myth.
Hmm.
Washington says they want to appoint him king for life, and he says, no, no, setting the precedent now. There's going to be a transition of power. He did it. That's the myth.
That's the
Did
myth,
it,
but it is a
did it,
myth.
did it? So what really happened then? If
Uh,
that's not what if that's not the hope I can latch onto,
it's
tell me
not.
why not?
Um,
Why didn't he stay in power for life?
because the founding fathers wanted to kill Washington by the end, and I think he was more afraid of being assassinated than holding on to power. That's the facts.
Damn it.
Yeah.
Damn it, Antoine.
Yep. It's just like the cutting down of the what is it? Lincoln can't tell a lie, or who was it? Who was it with the lie myth? Yeah, it's just one of those myths. He did
Hmm.
not let go of power because he was tired of it and didn't want another king. He let go of power because the man thought he was going to be killed. They loathed him by the end. Jefferson, all of them, they absolutely hated Washington by the end of his term.
Fair enough. So the narrator here goes on to compare presidents to kings, right? Kings of old. You think kings of old, absolute power, do whatever they want, and he makes the argument that presidents have more power than kings of old. One of the main points he has is that through all this expanded power and even like the weaponry, right? Kings didn't have nukes. President has his finger on the nuclear buttons, so to speak. And he's come up with clever ways of circumventing the War Powers Act, so he doesn't need congressional approval and all these different things. So I get that aspect, but I also still, I mean, other than other lords, whether or not they would all rally and rebel against the king to overthrow him, the wealthy landowners and things like that, we do still have states' rights. We do still have a Congress made up of the House and the Senate. So I don't know if I could follow him down the rabbit hole as far as he was going in saying that the president has more power. If you're talking about pure authority, I understand war powers in terms of military strength, because yeah, our weaponry is incomparable to lances and bows and arrows, but and even cannons. But I couldn't quite get to where he was going with that part. I don't know if you had any, and he made good points. You know, it's almost impossible to impeach, but the Congress can override vetoes the president makes, and that does happen. Not so much with Trump, but it does happen. So, you know, and maybe that happened with kings too, where the king proclaimed something and the lords came back and said no, no, and then that was an analogous of a veto power back then. So I don't know enough about the history to make those claims, but I don't know. I had a little trouble getting there from the case that he presented.
I mean, I think that he does a good job though of setting this slippery slope of slippery slope is probably not the best term, but it's basically been like a gradual erosion of that sort of pushback to the president, because
Agreed. No, you're
well, like I
right.
say, he made the case. He said he gave percentages. I don't have the notes here to say what the percentages were, but I do know that the cornerstone of the percentages was that Trump, what is he was
It was
vetoed.
almost like zero. I mean,
He's
it was
100% right.
ridiculous.
He was
Yeah,
100. Yeah,
yeah.
he was never vetoed. So, if you want to use that as sort of your litmus test as
It's still
to
dependent on the party, though. It's still dependent
but
on party
that's just the point,
loyalty.
though, is that the power of the presidents is so intoxicating, it's so all encompassing that that everyone who comes after is going to basically enjoy. They're going to benefit from what was done before, and it's like if you have someone like Trump who is able to benefit from such unilateral party alignment. And he was and we know who Donald Trump is. We know what kind of man he was, and the fact that he was able to have that kind of unity without anyone detracting in the last 4 years. Basically, he's making the argument that it's only a matter of time before someone else smarter, savvier comes along and is going to benefit from that kind of allegiance. But he's basically saying it will not. We're not going to get to a point where the president is less powerful. The president in each term gets more and more powerful, and that's the point he's making in the video. And he's using the history of the last 4 or 5 modern presidents to basically make that case. And that's the issue. That's the issue we're dealing with here.
Fair enough, man.
I mean, I know
Fair.
it's
I mean, it's a you're basically equating members of Congress and maybe even the courts to wealthy landowners of medieval Europe.
Well, it's worse. It's worse because I think that the wealthy landowners are what you're going to equate to your Jeff Bezoses, your the CEO of Google, the corporations. Those are the people who take the space of the wealthy landowners who have enough capital to throw around.
Are they more like the banks? Are they like more who was?
They're better than the banks. I mean, they're worse or better depending on where you're coming from. But I'm just saying they have more autonomy because they are cult of personality. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, these people have Mark Zuckerberg. They become cult of personality within their own spheres, and they have the money and the capital to back up their will. So they would basically, if we wanted to talk about those wealthy landowners, that's who these people are. And these people unilaterally kind of rebuked Trump for the better part of his presidency, and yet at the same time were at the mercy of Trump in terms of having to provide their resources to his bullpit. Right. So I mean, it's quite interesting that even in who we would imagine could be the greatest levy against the president's power ended up actually being quite complicit to that power.
Oh, it's a fair point. I mean, it really is. So that is the end of my notes on this particular video. Again, it's called Renegade Cut. It is, what was the title of it again?
What is it? No More Presidents?
No More Presidents. It's on YouTube. Go check it out. Let us know what your thoughts are on whether or not you agree with our points, if you think we got something wrong, if we missed an important topic that you want us to talk about, or just tell us about it, and we'll engage you on social media, on Twitter at Retraction Media.
All right, then. Retraction out.
Through the fields of our past, feelings part our ways, keeping us close but estranged now. Dreams holding us closer.